Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to the channel. So happy to have you back. I've got a very cool video for you today, and that is 1980s things that are not socially acceptable today. So the reason I found this video and I'm keen to react to it is because I've always felt as though I'm born in the wrong generation. I feel like the 60s, 70s, 80s are the best generation to be brought up in. I was born well into the 90s, so I'm a little bit on the younger side, but I always get frustrated sometimes with my generation and specifically the generation that comes afterwards. I feel like there's this constant, lack of respect. And I think maybe it's because we've been brought up with so much technology that we're so distracted and detached from reality, where in the past, it was imperative to be social with those around you, where that social interaction is not as important seemingly with the younger generation. So anyway, I thought it would be very cool to react to this. Things that happened in the 1980s that are not socially acceptable today, specifically in America. Folks, let's go. This should be fun.
40 years ago, things were very different. MTV was just catching on and Atari was still very popular. We didn't have all the constant news in our face, but our social media was hanging out with friends and family.
Yep.
Some of the things we used to do would probably get you arrested now. Safety standards in cars were pretty well absent. The regulations were more like mild suggestions rather than rules or laws.
Right.
Nobody wore seatbelts and many people just wondered why they were even there.
So folks, is that true? Is that true? So those that were brought up in the 80s, let's say 70s and 80s, were seatbelts simply optional? I cannot imagine a world in which it was simply optional to, wear your seatbelt. I guess in the back seat, sometimes it's optional, but in the front seat, if a cop sees you today without a seatbelt, you could get a ticket. So let me know, is that the truth?
As a kid, you could sit in the middle of the bench seat up front and control the radio. If you wanted to see over the tall dash, then you could just simply stand up. Heck, Dad may have even placed you in his lap so you could help him steer the car.
But I won't pause this too much, but I must say I just love vehicles from this era. My family are very big into, classic cars, specifically classic Alfa Romeos. My preference aligns more with American muscle. I would love to have a classic American muscle car one day. That would be a big dream of mine. But I love that the bucket type of seats, and the classic, wooden dashboard with the analog dials. Oh my goodness, just to be in those cars, I feel like I get memories that I've never quite had. It just unlocks nostalgia that's not even there. I just love this era of vehicles, let me just tell you.
It was also common to see kids just packed in the back of a station wagon or maybe in the bed of a pickup truck.
Yeah.
Car seats were available for purchase, but rarely would you ever see one in a car. If your car was packed with kids, then it was usually easier just to leave them in the car and then go into the grocery store and shop. Most people just left the windows rolled down and the kids would be just fine.
Just simpler
Kids
times.
were very active, and it wasn't uncommon just to tell your parents you were going outside to play, and then you would disappear for most of the day, if not all of it. It was always easy to tell where all the neighborhood kids were just by glancing at someone's yard and seeing the collection of bicycles.
Yep.
If that wasn't seen, then most of the kids would knock on their friend's door to see if they were home and if they wanted to come out and play. If you went around riding bikes, then you certainly didn't wear a helmet. Most people couldn't even see these in stores to buy, and if you could, they wouldn't have even wanted them. Same thing with elbow pads and knee pads. Most kids just thought it was cool to show off your latest injury or skinned knee. If you happen to be too far from home too late, then no problem. Find one of the payphones that were all over the place, and if you didn't have change, then that wasn't a problem either. Your parents knew when they got the collect call.
So this is quite funny because when I grew up, I was also just playing with my friends after school, and sometimes if I needed to be picked up by my parents, I would use one of these telephone boxes, and I would always use the collect call option, essentially let them know that they'll be charged for this call, and that's how they always knew to pick me up. So this I can almost align to. At the same time, in South Africa, I feel like we're 10 years behind, so that might make sense. But this is this emphasizes how great this era was, because young kids, in order to not be bored, they had to get out. They had to get out, meet their friends, play with their friends, specifically outside. And that enhanced social interaction. The only other thing that they might be able to do to keep themselves occupied would be maybe to turn on the radio or watch the limited channels on TV. But today it's just so easy for kids not to be bored. They just take out their phones, they go on their computers, play video games. So it's a totally different era.
You have a collect call from.
I'm at the community center.
Do you accept charges?
Your mom and dad would just come and pick you up and load up the bikes if you had them. Otherwise, your parents just expected you to be home by the time the street lights came on. Smoking was still very big, and parents smoked in the home and in the car with kids still in it. Secondhand smoke was just something that everyone had to live with, and most people weren't worried about exposing it to kids. It wasn't uncommon to see people just smoking away in restaurants, and most of them probably didn't even have smoking sections. Things were so different back then that there were cigarette machines in front of some stores and restaurants. No ID check or anything, just insert the quarters and pull the knob. It was also a time when kids would run to the convenience store and pick up some essentials. Sometimes those essentials were cigarettes, and all we needed was a note from mom or dad and a blank check.
Simpler times, folks.
Considering how most people were about smoking, it's not surprising that alcohol would be much different. Alcohol wasn't something that kids enjoyed, but I'm sure many tasted it just to see what it was like when parents offered it. Being a latchkey kid was perfectly fine. Parents were busy working and doing other things, so it was quite common to see kids at home by themselves or watching younger siblings until they got home. Parents just thought if kids were old enough to dial the important numbers or 911, they were responsible enough to be at home alone. Physical punishment was also something that was viewed very differently. Paddling or swats from parents, family, or teachers was considered completely reasonable if the kids misbehaved or were disrespectful. Punishment was usually swift and painful. Peanut allergy.
What is your folks' ideas or opinions regarding corporal punishment? South Africa, it didn't really happen to me too often. I feel like I'm a bit too much part of this newer generation where hitting the kids wasn't necessarily accepted. But I know about 10 years before I went to school, giving corporal punishments, such as a smack on the bottom with a wooden stick or something, was very much accepted, and the parents were very happy for it to be done. They had no problems with it. I think a decade later, during when I went to school, that's when people started to have a problem with corporal punishment. What do you folks think of it? Do you think it enhanced respect from the children to elders, or do you think it was completely unnecessary? I'll definitely be interested to know what your opinions were.
Allergies certainly were around back then, but kids still brought peanut butter sandwiches and peanut products to school. Peanut and other allergy bans weren't a thing. EpiPens didn't hit the market until 1987, so if you had an allergy, you just had to hope you didn't die. If you were a teenager in the 1980s, then you didn't have Instagram or Snapchat. Your social media was hanging out at the mall with your friends. You could do a little shopping, eating, and a whole lot of hanging out. Parents would allow their kids to roam the mall by themselves for hours. Kids may still go to the mall today, but not quite as much. If they hang out there all day now, they might accuse you of loitering. Chickenpox parties were so...
I've heard about this. I've heard that the mall used to be the frequently visited spot for all teenagers. That used to be the cool place to go. When I grew up, me and my friends definitely went to the mall quite often to hang out, but it wasn't as frequented as it was maybe in a generation before. So let me know, was that your most frequented place with your friends? It seems like that would have been such a cool place to meet up, especially when you didn't have phones and things like that. You meet up at your local watering ground there in the mall, meet up with your friends, discuss what's going on, where today it's just so easy to get on your phone and text. So I guess that's why the mall meeting ground has gone down over the years.
Something that many people had long before there was a vaccine. Most people felt it was best just to get chickenpox out of the way so you wouldn't have to worry about it later. If one kid started showing signs, then it was time to gather every other kid who hadn't gotten it for a good old-fashioned party.
I've heard about that.
The PG-13 rating didn't exist until July 1st, 1984, and prior to that, they got away with a lot more. People realized that there was a huge gap between PG and R. If you take a look back at the movie Airplane, which was PG, you'll understand how wide this gap was. The movie was filled with a lot of adult humor in it, and it even showed some nudity. On August 10, 1984, the action film Red Dawn starring Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen became the first ever PG-13 movie to be released in theaters.
I had no idea.
Over the last 40 years, there have been many...
I had no idea that the PG-13 rating only came out later on in the 1980s. I always just thought it was always a thing, so that's interesting to note.
Many changes, not just in technology, but in regulations on what we can and cannot do. Most of the younger generations do not realize how many changes have taken place during the 80s and have continued to do so. I hope you enjoyed this little walk down memory lane. Thank you so much for watching.
Why don't you come up here, Pumpkin?
See what else is here.
What are you doing, Larry?
Well, Vince, I've asked my pumpkin to sit on my lap to prove a point.
And what is that, your Larryness?
Even if we fasten our safety belts, even if you hold on tight, even if you were watching the road, in a crash, your pumpkin will be nothing but a squash.
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Use child safety seats.
We love that little pumpkin to pieces.
Okay, Joey, it's a wrap.
They don't make ads like they used to, folks?
Hi, I'm Joey Lawrence if you need a break. After I'm done here, I get a ride home. But the thing is, I will only get into a car with someone who wears their seatbelt. You see, kids like me usually do what the driver does. If they don't buckle, we don't buckle. Sounds pretty dumb, huh? But it happens, just like accidents. Give a kid a break. Buckle up. Your life and theirs is in your hands.
Drag it down, blow that smoke all around, dragon baby.
So this is an anti-smoking ad?
Acting cool, wanna share your fool, dragon baby.
You're smoking fool, you know it just ain't cool.
Girl, where you going with that dragon breath? When you walk in a room, no, they can't stand the fumes. Ooh, dragon lady.
Tell me, baby,
baby,
why you smoke that trash?
Why, girl?
Everybody's saying
Woof.
you ain't got no class.
Can't you see what you are? You're a drag, yes you are.
Dragon lady,
A message for you and me from the American Cancer Society.
don't be a dragon lady.
Folks, let me know if you remember seeing those two ads. We just saw the one promoting wearing your safety belt and the anti-smoking ad by the Cancer Society of America. I'll be very interested to know if you remember those ads. They definitely do not make ads like they used to. The ads today are extremely boring, where I feel like the ads of the past had a bit more personality to them, but that's just my opinion. Well, folks, I thoroughly enjoyed that. Seeing what was socially acceptable back then that is not socially acceptable back today definitely emphasizes how things have changed over the years. And let me tell you, I wish I was back in that era. Even the sport was better. Let's be honest. If you're, American sports fans and you grew up during that era, you got to see Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Michael Jordan all in the same era. What a beautiful time that must have been. I wish I could have a time machine. But yeah, folks, that's all I have for you today. If you did like the video or you found it interesting, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It definitely helps a lot. But until next time, I hope you have a good one. I will see you when I see you. Cheers.